Picture this, it's a chilly gray morning in 1961, and two young guys are standing on a train platform in Dartford, England, clutching records that would change the world. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, just kids with big dreams, spot each other across the tracks, their arms full of rare blues vinyls, Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, the kind of music that was like gold dust in England back then. That awkward wave, that quick chat about their shared love for American blues was the spark that ignited the Rolling Stones. But here's the hook, this isn't just a story about music. It's about a friendship that survived epic fights, betrayals, and the wild ride of fame, a bond that shaped rock and roll history. Stick with me until the end of this video, because you're going to see how Mick and Keith went from train station dreamers to legends who still rock the stage today. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single moment of this incredible journey. Let's set the scene. It's 1961 and England is just waking up to the raw, soulful sound of American blues. Most kids are listening to pop tunes, but Mick and Keith? They're obsessed with the gritty, rebellious music of artists like Howlin' Wolf and Little Richard. That day at Dartford Station, they weren't just exchanging small talk, they were connecting over a shared passion. Mick, with his sharp eyes and big ideas, was already dreaming of something huge. Keith, intense and focused, was all about the music itself, every note and riff like a piece of his soul. They started hanging out, jamming in tiny apartments, and playing in smoky London clubs. Night after night, they poured their hearts into the blues, losing themselves in the thunder of guitars and raw lyrics. It was magic, two young guys chasing a sound that felt like freedom. But even back then, you could see the differences between them. Keith was all in for the music. He'd play his guitar until his fingers were raw, studying every chord like it was a puzzle to solve. For him, the blues was everything, a way to feel alive, to rebel against the boring world around them. Mick, though, had one eye on the music and one eye on the future. He wanted the world to hear their sound. He dreamed of sold-out shows, screaming fans, and a stage bigger than those dingy clubs. Keith wanted to live the blues. Mick wanted to make it a global sensation. That mix of grit and ambition was like a chemical reaction. It set the stage for something explosive. Together, they started writing songs, blending the raw energy of American blues with their own English twist. The Rolling Stones were born, and the world was about to take notice. Fast forward to the mid-1960s, and the Stones were on fire. Hits like Satisfaction and Paint It Black were blasting from radios everywhere. Mick and Keith were no longer just kids with records, they were rock stars. But with fame came pressure, and that's when the first cracks in their friendship started to show. Keith was the rebel, living the rock and roll life to the fullest. He didn't care about rules or what people thought. He'd stay up all night, chasing the next riff, living like the blues heroes he admired. Mick, on the other hand, was thinking about the big picture. He was managing the band's image, making sure they stayed in the spotlight. He wanted the Stones to evolve, to keep up with a music world that was changing fast. For Mick, success wasn't just about the music, it was about staying relevant, about building a legacy. This wasn't just a difference in style, it was a clash of beliefs. Keith saw music as a kind of sacred mission, something pure and untouchable. Mick saw it as a way to grow, to reach new fans, to make the Stones bigger than ever. Those differences didn't just stay in the studio, they started to spill into their personal lives. Keith's wild lifestyle, partying, late nights, and a growing drug habit worried Mick. He felt like Keith was risking everything they'd worked for. Mick was out there shaking hands, doing interviews, and keeping the band's reputation polished while Keith seemed to be spiraling. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about trust, and that trust was starting to fray. Things came to a head in 1977. Keith was arrested in Toronto for heroin possession, and the news hit like a bombshell. Mick was furious. He'd been working so hard to keep the Stones on track, and now Keith's drug problems were threatening to derail everything. To Mick, it felt like Keith didn't care, like he was willing to throw away their dreams for a reckless lifestyle. For Keith, it was different. He was struggling, sure, but he felt like Mick was trying to control everything, turning the Stones into something too polished, too mainstream. The arrest wasn't just a legal problem, it was a symbol of the growing gap between them. Mick felt betrayed, like Keith was choosing chaos over the band. Keith felt like Mick was abandoning the raw, rebellious spirit that made them the Stones in the first place. Stop by the 1980s, that gap had turned into a wall. The band was still making music, but Mick and Keith could barely be in the same room. When they recorded their album Undercover in 1983, things were so tense that their producer had to come up with a crazy plan. Mick would work in the studio during the day, and Keith would take over at night. They weren't even recording together anymore. It was like they were on different planets. Each of them felt trapped by the other. Keith thought Mick was too focused on fame, chasing trends instead of sticking to their blues roots. Mick felt like Keith was holding them back, refusing to compromise or try new things. The Rolling Stones were still one of the biggest bands in the world, but behind the scenes, their partnership was falling apart. Then, in 1985, Mick made a move that felt like a knife in Keith's back. He released a solo album called She's the Boss. To Keith, this wasn't just a side project, it was a betrayal. The Rolling Stones were everything to him, and now Mick was stepping out on his own, chasing personal fame. Keith was hurt, and he didn't hold back. He started calling Mick Her Majesty in interviews, poking fun at Mick's ambition and what he saw as a big ego. It wasn't just a joke, it was a sign of how deep the rift had grown. For Mick, the solo album was a chance to explore new ideas, to stretch his wings. But to Keith, it felt like Mick was ready to walk away from the Stones, from their friendship, from everything they'd built together. The tension wasn't just professional anymore, it was personal. And it hurt. The breaking point came in 2010 when Keith released his memoir, Life. Fans were expecting a wild rock and roll story, but what they got was something much rawer. Keith didn't hold back about Mick. He wrote about their fights, Mick's solo ambitions, and what he saw as Mick's need to control everything. Some parts of the book were funny, with Keith poking fun at Mick's quirks. But other parts were sharp, full of bitterness about the times Mick seemed to put himself above the band. For Keith, writing Life was a way to let it all out too. Tell the world his side of the story. But for Mick, reading it was like a punch to the gut. He hadn't expected Keith to air their private struggles so publicly. It felt like an attack, like Keith was painting him as the bad guy who cared more about fame than their friendship. But here's where the story takes a turn. Even in Life, there was a flicker of something deeper. Keith compared their relationship to bickering siblings, always fighting but always tied together. Despite the anger, there was love there, a bond that had survived decades of chaos. Mick felt hurt by the book, but he couldn't ignore that heartfelt thread running through Keith's words. It made him think about everything they'd been through, the late-night jam sessions, the packed stadiums, the highs and lows of their incredible journey. Slowly, quietly, they started to rebuild. There was no big apology, no dramatic moment where they hugged it out. Instead, they went back to what they knew best, making music together. When they got back in the studio, something clicked. The tension was still there, but it was different now. Every song they worked on became a way to reconnect. They weren't just writing music, they were remembering who they were. From those early days in Dartford to the global stages of the 1970s, they'd shared a life that no one else could understand. The studio became a safe space, a place where they could let go of the past and focus on what mattered, the music. For Keith, it was about getting back to the blues, the sound that had brought them together. For Mick, it was about creating something new, something that showed the world the Stones were still relevant. Together, they found a balance, a way to honor their differences and turn them into something powerful. By the time they released Hackney Diamonds in 2023, Mick and Keith were in their 80s, but you'd never know it from the energy in their music. The album was like a love letter to their roots, a mix of raw blues and fresh ideas that felt like the Stones at their best. It wasn't just a new record. It was proof that they'd learned to work together again. Mick's big ideas and Keith's gritty soul came together in a way that felt natural, like they'd finally figured out how to share the spotlight. Fans could hear it in every track, the sound of two old friends who'd been through hell and back, still making music that mattered. Today, when you see Mick and Keith on stage, it's like watching history come alive. They're not the same kids who met at Dartford Station, but you can still see traces of those dreamers in their eyes. Keith, with his guitar slung low, plays with the same fire he had in the 1960s. Mick struts across the stage, commanding the crowd like he was born for it. When they share a quick nod or a smirk, it's more than just part of the show. It's a moment that carries decades of memories, fights, laughter, betrayals, and triumphs. They've been through it all, and they're still standing, still creating, still rocking the world. Keith once said their relationship is like a marriage, one that could never fully break. That's the heart of their story. They're not perfect. They've hurt each other, pushed each other to the edge, and come close to losing it all. But through every storm, they've found their way back to the music. It's what keeps them going, what keeps them connected. For fans, watching them perform is like taking a trip through rock and roll history. Every song is a chapter in their story, from the smoky clubs of London to the massive stadiums of today. It's a reminder of how powerful music can be, how it can bring people together, tear them apart, and then bring them back again. Hackney Diamonds isn't just an album, it's a celebration of everything Mick and Keith have been through. It's got the raw energy of their early days, mixed with the wisdom of two guys who've lived 1,000 lives. When you listen to it, you can hear the sound of two rebels who never gave up, who kept fighting for their music and for each other. It's a testament to their resilience, to the idea that even the toughest relationships can survive if there's something worth fighting for. For Mick and Keith, that something is the Rolling Stones, a legacy that's bigger than either of them, but one they could only build together. As they move through their 80s, Mick and Keith are still out there proving that time doesn't dull a true spark. Their partnership isn't perfect, but it's real. It's a mix of love, tension, and respect, built on a shared history that's shaped not just their lives, but the entire world of music. When they step on stage, it's not just a performance, it's a story. A story of two kids who met by chance, who dreamed big, who fought hard, and who never stopped believing in the power of their music. That's what makes them legends. That's what makes their journey so unforgettable. So, what did you think of Mick and Keith's wild ride? Drop a comment below and let me know your favorite Rolling Stones moment or song. If you love this deep dive into their story, give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend who's crazy about rock and roll. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories about the legends who shaped music history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.